They used to laugh at the delivery guy, mocking him every chance they got. But everything changed the day he walked in as their new boss and handed them their termination letters. For nearly 10 years, Marcus Delaney had been delivering packages all across downtown Phoenix. He knew every back alley, every service door, every receptionist who barely looked up when he arrived. The job wasn't fancy, but it paid the bills, and Marcus took pride in doing it right. Most people saw him as just another guy in uniform, someone easy to ignore. Especially at Whitfield and Crane, a fancy marketing firm with shiny marble floors and giant windows, the way people looked down on him was even worse. The first time Marcus stepped through those glass doors, he expected it to be just another delivery. But he immediately noticed the stares. People looked at him like he didn't exist, or worse, like he wasn't worth noticing. The receptionist didn't even look up when she signed for the package. That didn't bother him. He was used to that kind of thing. But over time, he noticed more. The whispers, the smirks, the way some employees laughed as he walked by. At first, he brushed it off, thinking maybe he was imagining it. Until one day he wasn't. While setting a package down, someone in the office said loud enough for all to hear, "Can you imagine if the delivery guy was our boss?" Everyone burst out laughing. Marcus didn't turn around, but he felt heat rise in his chest. He knew that voice. Jason Bryant, one of the senior execs, always dressed sharp, always cracking jokes for attention. Then a woman added, "Please? He's used to lifting boxes, not leading meetings." More laughter followed. Marcus stayed calm, handed the tablet to the receptionist, and got it back without a word. He had dealt with worse. He had learned to ignore this kind of behavior. But something about this moment stayed with him. It wasn't just what they said, it was how sure they were that someone like him could never be in charge. He walked out, past rows of glass-walled offices where people sat sipping expensive coffee and pretending to work. Some looked at him with disinterest. Others didn't even notice him. Just another delivery guy passing through. But as he reached the exit, he caught a glimpse of himself in the glass, his uniform, the delivery scanner on his belt, his rough hands from years of work. That's all they saw. And for the first time in a long while, that actually bothered him. The Arizona sun hit hard as he got into his van. He sat for a minute, gripping the steering wheel. He wasn't mad. Anger fades. This was something deeper, sharper. They thought they knew who he was. They had no clue. But soon, they would. Marcus wasn't one to dwell on things. He'd faced disrespect before, people assuming he wasn't smart, treating him like he didn't matter. It wasn't new. It wasn't even surprising. But something about what happened at Whitfield and Crane stuck with him. That night, after his last delivery, he parked outside his small apartment in Mesa. It wasn't much, just one bedroom, old carpet, a kitchen with worn cabinets. But it was his. He sat in the dark, holding the steering wheel, staring at the streetlight outside. For years, he'd told himself it didn't matter what people thought, as long as he worked hard and earned an honest living. But tonight, that didn't feel like enough. The laughter back at Whitfield and Crane wasn't just rude, it was confident. They truly believed they were better than him, that someone like him could never be in charge. He needed to talk to someone. Marcus pulled out his phone and called the one person who always understood him, his older brother, Elijah. Elijah picked up after 2 rings. "Yo, you good?" "I'm good," Marcus said. "What about you?" Elijah could hear something in his tone. "What's up?" Marcus hesitated. Had one of those days. Elijah chuckled. "Let me guess, some rich folks treated you like you didn't belong?" Marcus sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Something like that." "Ain't nothing new," Elijah said. "It's not," Marcus agreed, but today felt different. Elijah didn't push. He just listened. "They laughed," Marcus finally said, like full-on laughed at the idea of me being anything more than a delivery guy. There was a pause. Then Elijah said something unexpected. Good. Marcus blinked. Good? Yeah, Elijah said. Means you're finally tired of it. Marcus leaned back and stared at the dashboard. So what am I supposed to do? Quit my job because a bunch of idiots don't respect me? Nah, Elijah replied. But you're smarter than that. Smarter than them too. Those words sank in. Marcus had always been good with numbers, strategy. When he was 16, he flipped sneakers for profit. Later, he got into stocks, small businesses, even real estate. He understood how the game worked, but he had never gone all in. Elijah's voice broke the silence. Remember what Dad used to say, when people only see you one way, you've got two choices. Prove them right or prove them wrong. Marcus let out a long breath. Yeah, I remember. Then what are you going to do? Elijah asked. Marcus didn't reply right away. His mind drifted back to Whitfield and Crane, their pricey suits, smug looks, and the way they had laughed at the idea of him ever being more than a delivery guy. They saw him as small, and maybe until now he had seen himself that way too. He looked down at the old steering wheel in his hands, then at the pile of delivery slips on the dashboard. This wasn't all he was. He knew that, but they didn't, and that had to change. Proving them wrong wouldn't happen overnight, but it would happen. Marcus was never just a delivery guy. Not really. That was just the part of himself he allowed the world to see. The uniform, the packages, the beat-up work boots, that's all they noticed. But behind all that was someone else. While they spent their days making ads and crunching client numbers, Marcus had been crunching numbers too, his own. He had always had a business mind. Even as a kid, while others spent their pocket money on games or snacks, Marcus was flipping rare sneakers, limited drops, and hard-to-find pairs. He knew exactly when to buy and who would pay twice, even 3 times the price. By the time he was 20, he moved on to cars, buying used, fixing them up, selling them for profit. He learned how to negotiate, how to spot a deal before anyone else did. He started investing, stocks, small businesses, never showed off, never talked about it, but he watched, he studied, he built, and over the past year, something even bigger had started taking shape. Marcus had been working on a business plan, one that caught the eye of serious investors, people who didn't care about where he came from or what job he worked. They cared about what he knew. They saw his potential. They saw how he broke down companies, pinpointing weak spots, seeing their true worth before anyone else. And now they were ready to invest in him. After long delivery shifts, Marcus had been meeting with them, late nights on Zoom, reviewing financials, polishing his strategy. He had already helped 2 failing businesses bounce back, quietly, efficiently. No one at Whitfield and Crane had any idea, but they were about to. One evening, Marcus sat across from his main investor, Anthony Wallace, in a quiet lounge at a downtown hotel. The room had soft lighting, dark leather chairs, and the quiet buzz of high-stakes conversations. Wallace was sharp, serious, a man who made his fortune in real estate. He didn't waste time with people who weren't serious. So, tell me again, Wallace said, sipping an espresso. Why Whitfield and Crane? Marcus leaned forward. Because they're in trouble, and they don't even know it yet. Wallace raised an eyebrow. Go on. Marcus took out a folder from his briefcase and opened it on the table. They've been losing clients for the past year. Bad leadership, old strategies, spending money in all the wrong places. On the outside, they look successful, but under the surface, they're drowning in debt. He pointed to the documents. I give it 6 months before they either downsize or sell. Wallace flipped through the pages slowly. You sure? Marcus nodded. I've been tracking them for months. Their biggest clients are pulling back. Their results don't match their promises. They're relying on their reputation, not real performance, and it's catching up to them. Wallace smirked. And you want to be the one to buy them? Without hesitation, Marcus said, I don't just want to buy them. I want to fix them, clean house, hire the right people, make them great again. Wallace leaned back, tapping his fingers on the table. It's a bold move. It's a smart one, Marcus replied. Wallace chuckled. You've got guts, I'll give you that. He set his cup down, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a check. He slid it across the table. Marcus looked down at it. It was exactly the amount he needed to make his first move. You've got my support, Wallace said. Don't make me regret it. Marcus picked up the check, the weight of the moment sinking in. The same people who had laughed at him, they were about to meet their new boss, and they didn't even know it yet. He knew success wouldn't come from rushing in. Buying a company wasn't like flipping a car or trading stocks. It took planning, careful steps. Marcus had spent months studying Whitfield and Crane's numbers, watching their every mistake, every drop in performance. The company looked polished on the outside, nice office, fancy image, respected name, but underneath, it was a mess. Their biggest clients were cutting back, their spending was out of control, and leadership had no clue how to fix it. And Marcus wasn't the only one who noticed. People in the industry were starting to whisper about layoffs, possible restructuring. Some employees felt it in the air. Others stayed in denial, thinking the company was too big to fail. But Marcus knew better. With Wallace and the other investors behind him, he started to make moves, quietly, carefully. The first step was getting control of the shares. Whitfield and Crane wasn't a public company, but it had several stakeholders, former executives, private investors, people who had put money in long ago and now wanted out before the business completely fell apart. Marcus approached them one by one, offering deals they couldn't turn down. Some of them were unsure at first. A delivery guy trying to buy into a top marketing firm. But money speaks, and Marcus had leverage. Slowly, one after another, they agreed. It took weeks, late-night calls, quiet meetings, careful planning. But when the final signatures were in, Marcus owned the majority of Whitfield and Crane. He was now in control. The final step was to make it official. The current CEO, Charles Langdon, had built his career off old family money and the right connections. He wasn't particularly smart, just lucky. And now his luck had run out. Marcus sent a direct email to Langdon's assistant. Subject: Immediate meeting required. Langdon's assistant, Ellen, who had worked there for over 2 decades, blinked when she saw Marcus's name pop up in the sender field. She had watched him drop off packages for years. Why would he be emailing the CEO directly? She knocked gently on Langdon's door and stepped in. Sir, I just received an urgent email from Marcus Delaney. Langdon didn't even look up. Who? The delivery guy, she said quietly. Langdon paused, then let out a dry laugh. You mean the guy who hangs around the lobby? What could he possibly want? He's asking to meet. Right away. Langdon leaned back, rubbing his temples. He was already frustrated. Profits were down. Their biggest client had just walked. The last thing he needed was some nonsense like this. Fine, he grumbled. Bring him in. Let's get this joke over with. By the time Marcus walked into the building that morning, something in the air had changed. People were whispering, sharing curious glances in the hallway. Even the receptionist, who'd barely looked at him for years, sat up straighter as he passed. Langdon sat in his office, clearly annoyed. He didn't even bother standing. What's this about? He asked without looking away from his screen. Marcus took a seat and placed a thick envelope on the desk. This is about the fact that, as of this morning, I'm the majority owner of Whitfield and Crane. Langdon looked up, confused. Then he laughed. You? That's ridiculous. Marcus didn't flinch. Check the papers. Langdon opened the envelope and began flipping through the documents. His face quickly went pale. This has to be a mistake, he muttered. Who do you think you are? Marcus leaned back, calm. I think I'm your new boss. Langdon slammed the paperwork on the desk. This firm isn't for sale. It was, Marcus replied. You just didn't know it." Langdon opened his mouth, then shut it again. He stared at the documents, looking for anything that might prove this wrong. But the truth was right in front of him. He wasn't in charge anymore. Marcus stood. "You've got until the end of the day to clear out your office." Langdon didn't move, just stared. Marcus turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Oh, and Charles," he said with a small smile, "don't worry. I'm sure there's a delivery job out there for you somewhere." Langdon's face turned red, his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. The office would never be the same again. For the first time in years, Marcus Delaney wasn't just passing through. He was the one in charge. Taking over the company was one thing. Making sure everyone understood what that meant was another. As Marcus walked out of Langdon's office, the whispers grew louder. Employees exchanged looks. They had seen him before, hundreds of times, but not like this. No uniform, no delivery scanner, just calm confidence and the presence of someone who owned the room. Some noticed the folder he had taken in. And when Langdon's door slammed shut behind him, a few stood from their desks, trying to figure out what had just happened. Marcus ignored the stares. He had work to do. He turned to Ellen, Langdon's longtime assistant. She was watching him closely, her expression unreadable. "I need everyone in the main conference room," Marcus said. 10 minutes. Ellen hesitated. She had worked under Langdon for years, but she had also seen the problems, how things had been falling apart bit by bit. She glanced at the closed office door, then back at Marcus. "I'll send the email," she said. Minutes later, Whitfield and Crane's employees filled the sleek, glass-walled conference room, whispering among themselves. Ryan Bryant, the senior executive who once laughed about Marcus ever being in charge, leaned over and muttered, "What is this? A security drill?" His colleague smirked. "Maybe they're laying off the janitors." But the joking stopped cold when Marcus stepped to the front of the room. No one sat. No one spoke. The silence stretched as Marcus scanned the room, locking eyes with people one by one. Some looked confused, others impatient, and a few, like Ryan, still seemed amused. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I called this meeting." A few people shifted uncomfortably, trading quick glances. "As of this morning," Marcus continued, "I'm now the majority owner of Whitfield and Crane." A wave of stunned silence rolled across the room. Someone gave a small, nervous laugh, like they were waiting for a joke. But none came. Ryan crossed his arms, smirking. "You're kidding." Marcus looked directly at him, his face steady. "Do I look like I'm kidding?" Ryan's smirk faded. Marcus placed a thick pile of documents on the conference table. Financial records, contracts, every signed deal that gave him control. He gestured to the stack. "If anyone has doubts, feel free to take a look." No one moved. The truth hit the room all at once. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a rumor. Marcus Delaney, the man they ignored, laughed at, dismissed, was now in charge. For the first time since stepping into that office, Marcus allowed himself a moment. He let it sink in, let them sit with it. Then he spoke again. "I've been walking through this building for years. Most of you never saw me. Some of you did and made sure I knew exactly how little you thought of me." His eyes flicked briefly toward Ryan. "I remember every joke, every insult, every time someone assumed I didn't belong." Ryan shifted his weight but said nothing. "But I also remember watching this company make mistake after mistake," Marcus continued. "I saw potential go to waste because those in charge didn't want to change, and I remember thinking, if I ever got the chance, I'd do things differently." He stepped forward. His voice stayed calm, firm. "Well, that chance is here." The mood in the room began to shift. People who had been standing with crossed arms dropped them. Others who leaned lazily against the walls now stood straight. Marcus looked around, letting his next words hit with force. "Things are about to change. Some of you won't like it. Some of you won't be here for it. Silence. He gave them a second before continuing. But for those of you willing to work, for those ready to help build something better, you'll have a place here. His gaze moved across every face in the room. This is not the same company it was yesterday, and it's definitely not the same one it was when I walked in here wearing a delivery uniform. A final pause. Then with quiet confidence, he said, "If you don't like that, there's the door." His words hung in the air like a verdict, heavy, real. And for the first time, everyone in that office understood. Marcus Delaney wasn't just walking through the building anymore. He owned it. No one said a word. No one moved. The room was frozen in silence. Marcus could see it on their faces: shock, doubt, discomfort. People who, just minutes earlier, thought they were untouchable were now realizing things had changed. Finally, someone spoke. Ryan Bryant let out a dry, bitter laugh. He shook his head, arms crossed. "This is nuts," he muttered. "You can't be serious." Marcus turned toward him, calm as ever. "You think I'd be standing here saying all this if I wasn't serious?" Ryan ran a hand through his hair. "So what? You walk in here, take over, and we all just follow orders?" "No," Marcus replied. "You just need to do your job. And if you can't handle that, you're free to go." Ryan scoffed. "Right. Because you suddenly know how to run a company like this?" Marcus stepped closer. "I know this firm better than you think. I've spent years watching the arrogance, watching the mistakes, watching the outdated ways of doing things. And I've spent even more time learning how to run businesses the right way." Ryan's jaw tensed. "You're making a mistake." "No," Marcus said evenly. "The mistake was thinking I didn't belong here." A few people whispered. Some of the junior staff, those who had been overlooked for years, looked interested, even hopeful. Marcus let the room breathe for a second. Then he said, "Let's actually talk about mistakes." He pulled another folder from the pile and flipped it open. "Ryan, since you have so much to say, maybe you'd like to explain why your department was responsible for one of the biggest client losses in company history." Ryan's face turned red. "That's not—" Marcus cut him off. "It is? And I've got the reports to back it up. Over-promising, under-delivering, ignoring market trends. The client left and took millions with them." He tapped the folder, then shut it. "So if we're questioning who deserves to be here, I'd say you have more explaining to do than I ever did." Ryan's mouth opened like he wanted to respond, but nothing came out, because he knew the truth. The numbers didn't lie. Marcus took a slow breath and turned back to the rest of the room. "This is the part where some of you start to panic. This is the moment," Marcus said, "where some of you start wondering if you're about to lose your jobs." He let that thought hang in the air for a second before continuing. "And the truth is, some of you will." That got their attention. He motioned to the stack of documents in front of him. "I've already done the homework. I know who actually brings value to this company. I know who's been coasting. I know who's been taking credit for work they didn't do." Some people visibly stiffened. Others shot nervous glances at coworkers, realizing that all the quiet office politics might now have real consequences. "There's dead weight in this company," Marcus said firmly, "and I don't carry dead weight. If you're here to work, to contribute, and help build something better, you've got nothing to worry about. But if you're just here to collect a paycheck and pretend you care," he shrugged, "you won't last long." Then, calmly and without emotion, he delivered the final blow. "Termination notices will go out by the end of the day." It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Ryan stepped forward. "You can't just—" "I can," Marcus said simply, "and I will." Ryan clenched his jaw. His pride wouldn't let him back down first. He straightened his tie, lifted his chin. "Fine. If this is how it's going to be, I quit." Marcus looked him dead in the eye. "That's the best decision you've made in years." Ryan scoffed, shook his head, and stormed out of the conference room, slamming the door behind him. The room stayed silent. Marcus gave the moment time to settle, then turned back to the rest of the staff. For those still standing here, remember this. Whitfield and Crane isn't just going to survive. It's going to grow. It's going to become better than it's ever been. He let his gaze drift across the room. Some faces looked nervous, some thoughtful. A few, especially among the junior staff, looked quietly hopeful. But that only happens with the right people in place, he said. If you're ready to step up, to really work, to help build something that matters, there's a place for you here. He paused again, then added, but if you're here because you think you're owed something, because you're comfortable, because you assume nothing will change, he nodded toward the door. You can follow Ryan. This time, the silence felt different. It wasn't shock anymore. It was understanding. They knew. Marcus Delaney wasn't the man they used to ignore. Not anymore. And from this day forward, he never would be again. By the time Marcus walked out of the conference room, everything had changed. Some employees sat quietly at their desks, stunned. Others whispered to each other, sneaking glances at the man they'd never paid attention to for years. Some looked nervous, some curious, and a few, just a few, looked inspired. Marcus didn't react to any of it. He had done what needed to be done. Now the real work began. He stepped into what was now his office, Langdon's old one, and closed the door behind him. The room was larger than he expected. Leather chairs, tall bookshelves filled with untouched business books, and a heavy oak desk that probably cost more than his first car. He walked toward the window, floor-to-ceiling glass, and looked out over the city. This moment was supposed to feel different. He had spent years working toward this, fighting every assumption, every insult, every moment someone made him feel small. He had proven them all wrong. And yet, as he stared at the skyline, he realized something important. It was never about revenge. If it had been, that feeling would have passed the moment Ryan walked out. Watching their shocked faces would have been enough. But it wasn't. He had done this because he knew he could build something better, not just for himself, but for the people in that building who, like him, had been overlooked, ignored, undervalued. There was real talent in that office, real ideas, and with the right leadership, they could make this company something worth being proud of again. As for the ones who didn't belong, their time was up. Marcus had learned that respect isn't handed out. It's earned through action, not words. A soft knock at the door pulled him out of his thoughts. Ellen, Langdon's former assistant, stepped inside, hesitating. "Everything okay?" she asked. Marcus turned from the window and gave a small nod. "Just getting used to the view." She smiled gently. "I imagine it looks a lot different from this side." He studied her for a moment. She wasn't like the others. She had been with this company long enough to witness its rise, its mistakes, and its long, slow fall. "I have a question for you," he said. She raised a brow. "All right. Why are you still here?" Ellen crossed her arms thoughtfully. "Because I loved what this place used to be," she said, "and I think, under the right leadership, it can be that again." Marcus nodded slowly. Ellen added, "If I'm being honest, I didn't see this coming. I've seen a lot of CEOs come and go, but I never thought this place would land in your hands." Marcus let out a soft chuckle. "Neither did they." She smirked, shaking her head. "Langdon's gone. Ryan quit. People are unsure of what comes next." "There's always uncertainty when things change," Marcus said. She looked at him for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. "Well, for what it's worth, I think this place needs change." Marcus smiled. "Then let's get to work." As Ellen walked out, Marcus turned back to the window. Change was on the way. Not just for Whitfield and Crane, not just for the employees still trying to make sense of what had happened, but for him too. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just trying to prove himself, he was leading. And this was only the beginning. The message was simple. Never judge someone by where they begin, because one day they might be the one signing your paycheck.